much. Okay, I hope everybody has a handout. Free handouts today. For those of you who are watching at home, if you would like a copy of the handout, just email me. I'll send you one. If you're watching it on Zoom or on YouTube afterwards, I'm happy to send you a copy of the handout. This morning, we're going to talk about one of the 10 commandments. That is the commandment to observe or remember the Sabbath day. So the 10 Commandments is depicted in every synagogue that I know of. 99% of the synagogues, maybe 100% of the synagogues. It has some depiction of the 10 Commandments in part of the architecture. And for us, it's over my head behind me there on the stained glass windows. The dark purple stained glass pieces form Hebrew letters. The right two columns are the first 5 commandments, and the left 2 columns are the next 5 commandments. You'll notice the Lamed Aleph on the 5 commandments on your left, which Lamed Aleph means no. Those are all the don'ts. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't commit, etc. On the left side, it begins with Anochi Adonai. It has hey there for Adonai. That is how Jews count the 10 commandments. I am the Lord your God. The Christians don't believe that's a commandment, which is kind of logical. It doesn't sound like a commandment. It's more like a statement. But we count it as a commandment, which means that the version of 10 commandments up there is a Jewish one, because we count it as a commandment. Of course, the fact that it's in Hebrew letters probably was a giveaway, but in case you didn't get it from the Hebrew, it's the Jewish counting. And also, the 4th commandment, you go the 4th line down, it says Zachor et, which means remember. And that's how you know it's the version of the 10 Commandments in the book of Exodus. Because as I'm sure everybody here knows, it's the 10 Commandments is repeated in the book of Deuteronomy. And in Deuteronomy, instead of Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho, it says Shamor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho. Observe the Sabbath day to make it holy. And so that's the Exodus version up there. So we have in your handout, in the first section there, by the way, I apologize for this small print. Wanted to get a lot of stuff in a small amount of space. So the Exodus is on the left side, Deuteronomy is on the right side. The bold-faced words in the English are the words that are different between Exodus and Deuteronomy. So the bold-face on the left are words that are in Exodus but not Deuteronomy. The bold-face on the right are words that are in Deuteronomy and not in Exodus. The major difference is the opening verb, either remember or observe, and then the reason for observing the Sabbath day. So on Exodus it says, for in 6 days, Yud He Vav He, that's God's name. Instead of saying Adonai, they just put the letters in English. So Yud He Vav He made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and he rested on the 7th day. Therefore Yud He Vav He blessed the Sabbath day and declared it holy. So the reason for observing the Sabbath in the book of Exodus is because God rested on the 7th day. He created in 6 days, rested on the 7th. We therefore do creative work 6 days and rest on the 7th. But in Deuteronomy, it doesn't say that. Instead, in Deuteronomy, it says, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do, you must remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and Yud He Vav He, your God, brought you out of there with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Therefore, Yud He Vav He, your God has commanded you to make the Sabbath day. Free slaves are not entitled to take a day off, and so the reason we're commemorating the Sabbath and taking a day off from work is because we're no longer slaves, and we're no longer slaves because God freed us from slavery in Egypt. It's a completely different reason for observing the 10 Commandments. Both of these reasons appear in the Kiddush for Friday night. So if you look on the right side, again, it's tiny print, I apologize. After Borei Pri Hagafen, the first line, you count 4 more lines down, and you get Zicharon Lema'aseh Bereshit, a remembrance of the act of creation. And 2 lines below that, Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim, a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt. So in the Kiddush that we do on Friday night, we mention both of the reasons given for why we're observing the Sabbath. Now, the words remember and keep cause a lot of rabbinic commentary. Why do we need 2 verbs? And so the first text below that in the Midrash, Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael says, remember and keep. Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael is a collection of commentaries of the Bible, interpretations of the Bible by the rabbis of the early centuries. So it says, remember and keep, remember it beforehand and keep it afterwards. And as I underlined there, it's like a wolf who tears both what is before him and what is behind him. I didn't understand that when I learned this with a teacher. My teacher said it's kind of like a lion going through the forest. And when a lion goes through the forest, the animals hear the lion coming and they scatter. They don't want to be caught by the lion. So before the lion even gets there, they're gone. And then as the lion passes through, they wait a while before make sure he's really gone before they come back again. So the Shabbat is like that. It prepares a way for itself before it gets there, and then after it leaves a wake in its path right behind it. So, and what they're trying to get at here is you remember it before it comes. You're getting ready for the Sabbath. It's not like a lion. It's like a good thing. So you want to get nice food. You want to prepare your table. You want to invite guests. You do all the preparations for Shabbat. You're really working hard to get ready for Shabbat. Then you observe Shabbat on the day itself. And then after Shabbat leaves, you remember the experience, the pleasantness of having rest and having friends for a few more days into the week. So the Shabbat is a preparatory experience, the day itself, and then sort of trying to bring that peacefulness into the week behind it. So that's what he's getting at there. At the bottom it says you should count the days of the week vis-a-vis the Sabbath. Today is the fourth day of the Sabbath. So for instance, I'm doing a wedding tomorrow, and in the ketubah, the very first line in a ketubah is Rishon b'Shabbat, the first day of Shabbat. That is to say, on Sunday, the couple got together to get married. And so in official documents, we count by the days of the week by the day of Shabbat. And that's following that midrash. The Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael has a couple more things to say about Shabbat. So to sanctify it, how do you likod show, to make it holy? How do you make the Sabbath holy? You sanctify it over a glass of wine with kiddush. So they say, great, so we should do that when the Shabbat comes in on Friday night. We have a glass of wine, just like we do every Friday night, and we say, this is a holy day with kiddush. But that tells me only about kiddush at night. How do I know I'm supposed to do it on the daytime? We're going to do kiddush at the end of the service before we go have lunch, right? We're going to have another glass of wine. Why do we do it during the day? Because it says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. So we're going to do the Kiddush again on the day, during the day. So we're going to do it in a few more minutes. Then another final one from Mechilta to Rabbi Ishmael. 6 days you shall do your labor and all your work, right? Now, is it possible for a person to do all your work in 6 days? Work is a lifelong experience, unfortunately, right? We have to work every day. We get to take off on Shabbat, but we're working our whole lives. We don't get to rest forever, so we never finish our work. How can we finish our work, do all our labor during the week? So the answer is you rest as if all your work has been done. Put it out of your mind. Forget about it. Rest from thoughts of work, right? And that way you don't think about it. Like you have this urge to pick up your phone and answer emails or text messages or phone calls or whatever. Just set it aside. Pretend it doesn't exist and just enjoy the world. That's what it means to do all your work on 6 days, but rest on the seventh. So then we have two comments from Ramban, not to be confused with Rambam. Usually Rambam gets pronounced on the first syllable, Ramban on the last syllable. The last letter is different, whether it's a M or an N. And their names are somewhat different. So Ramban is Moshe ben Nachman, and Rambam is Moshe ben Maimon, or Maimonides and Nachmanides. They lived about 100 years apart. Ramban was 100 years after Rambam. They're both from Spain, both scholars from Spain. Rambam ended up in Egypt in the 12th century. Ramban stayed in Spain in the 13th century, had a famous disputation with a priest named Pablo Cristiani. It was kind of a thing back then where the Jews would choose a champion, the Christians would choose a champion, and they'd argue about whose religion was better. Thankfully, we don't live in those days, but Ramban had to do that for the Jews. He also wrote a commentary on the Bible, and he was a Kabbalist. He was a mystical rabbi. Anyway, here's what he had to say about Shabbat. Our sages wrote in this regard, Zachor and Shamor were proclaimed in a single utterance. And he's quoting there, as I put in parentheses, the Talmud, Tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 27a. And you may remember that as a song that we do Friday nights, Shamor v'Zachor b'dibur echad. We do it as part of Lecha Dodi. Shamor and Zachor b'dibur echad were spoken in one utterance. That idea came from the Talmud and got incorporated into the song Lecha Dodi. The question the rabbis had was, which did God say? If in Exodus it said Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, and in Deuteronomy it says Shamor at Yom HaShabbat, which one did he say? Remember, observe. And he said both at once. Both at once. And if you think that sounds weird, that's because God can do anything. So he spoke both words at the same time. But then Ramban comments, what did they mean by this, that the both were the same? So Zachor introduces a mitzvah aseh, that is to say an obligation, a positive commandment, a commandment to do something, to sanctify the Sabbath day by having a nice meal, inviting guests over and saying kiddush. That makes it holy. Those are positive things we do to remember the Sabbath day. And Shamor introduces a mitzvah lo ta'aseh, a negative commandment or a prohibition, that is, don't work. So there's two aspects of Shabbat. Enjoy the Sabbath day and make it holy, and don't work on the Sabbath day, right? And so both of them are expressed in these two different verbs. And finally, Ramban says, alternatively, remembering Shabbat is remembering creation and our Creator. This is a mitzvah to constantly remember Shabbat, that we should not forget it or confuse it with the other days. For through our constant remembering of Shabbat, one recalls the act of creation at all times. As we're remembering it to get ready for Shabbat, and we remember the rest of Shabbat as we begin the new week, it's constantly reminding us that we live in a created world. And if there's order and purpose and meaning in the world, it's a created world. That means there's a intelligent force behind it, a creator. And so that's what Shabbat reminds us, that it's not living in a random, accidental world, but a purposeful world, and we have purpose and meaning. And so remembering Shabbat is an eternal sign between me and you, as we say on Vishamru, Oti Leolam. It's an eternal symbol of our relationship with God, and this constitutes a fundamental principle in the belief of God. So those are some teachings from our tradition about the fourth commandment, the commandment to observe or remember the Sabbath day. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.